All right, and we are live. Welcome everybody for joining. And if you're not here in the live and you're rewatching this, make sure you give this video a like. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel for the Holy Trinity, the girls, the goths, and the gays. And that is what we're going to be talking about tonight. I have my lovely co-host with me, the Nerdy Warlock. Go ahead and kind of introduce yourself.
Hello, I am the Nerdy Warlock, and you can find me at the Nerdy Warlock on everything, pretty much. And yeah. Hi, I'm so glad that you asked me to be on here.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you came. So I wanted to talk to you and kind of go over some of this with you tonight. We've talked a little bit, you guys, off air too. Like we kind of caught up because the last time I think you were on the channel was like a moon phase ago or so. So we had to do a little little catch up. But the title of this live is going to be LGBT and Witchcraft. And the reason for that is because the girls, the goths, the gays, you know, people of color, like I'm tired of having this conversation of trying to validate to other people why we belong in this community. I'm over like any sort of debate. Like, I don't know if people don't realize that the girls, the goths, and the gays literally made everything. Like, I don't know if y'all realize this. I don't know why this is even up for debate. But myself personally, this is not a Facebook or an Instagram thing. This is very much like a in community thing, like in my local community, where there is beliefs held that like trans women should not or could not be a high priestess of a coven. Like we're canceling that. We're over that in 2020. Like that's not, we're not entertaining that anymore. There's opinions that like, first of all, there's opinions that like men can't be witches, which like we're canceling that. That's over. There's opinions that like men aren't connected to the goddess. We're canceling that. That's over. Block, ban, delete. We're done. There's opinions that like trans women just haven't connected to their divine masculine, and that's why they're trans. We're over that. That's being canceled. Not in 2021, honey. No, thank you. So, and then there's also like, I mean, and I think some of this, unfortunately, has been supported in a lot of our occult doctrines. I mean, H.P. Lovecraft himself was a racist. Like, the crazy Arab as one of his characters, that's a little problematic.
Yeah.
Okay. The Witch's Bible right here, and like talking about talking about like homosexuality in the Witch's Bible and how essentially gay people can't manifest anything. We're not taking that into 2021 either. Now, I will say for the record that Janet has apologized for this. However, it is still in print. And people are still buying this and are still reading this and are still being sculpted by that doctrine. So it's still a problem.
Yes. No, what I was going to say was, you touched on H.P. Lovecraft. Girl, I mean, he has his own gender journey. He was raised for, I want to say the first 4 to 7 years of his life as a female before he was told that he was male, which he was, biologically male. But he was raised female, not knowing that he was male for the first chunk of his life. And I think that influenced his views going forward on gender and sexuality heavily. But,
so,
you were saying, what? Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, you were saying that you had experienced, a lot of this in real life, like, outside of this cyber world.
Yes.
But I've experienced it so much online, and I don't think that it's an isolated problem to any one area. It's a global phenomenon for this neo-pagan movement. It's not just one group or one country, or you know what I mean. It's everywhere. So yeah.
Yeah.
Get on
yeah. I mean, I have been told myself, it's not always like in your face. It's a lot of times it's like covert, you know what I mean?
Right.
And like, I have been told before that like, as a trans woman, I shouldn't be leading a coven, or as a trans woman, I shouldn't be teaching at a metaphysical store. Excuse me?
Right.
Like, first of all, if you're not in the coven, you don't need to have an opinion on me being a high priestess, because a high priestess is someone who is a high priestess to their coven. That title, that role, does not necessarily have to extend outside of the coven. So if you don't want your high priestess to be trans, I mean, that's kind of weird, but like, you're not in my coven, so why does it affect you? Right. And then like, I don't know why being trans and teaching classes would even be an issue remotely.
Right.
Like, when I'm teaching an astrology class, I'm not talking about my genitals. So I don't know why it's even on the table for discussion.
Word. It's just ridiculous that it is 2021 now. And LGBT people have existed since the beginning of humanity. But yet we still, primarily for the last 2,000 years, continue to have to like tell people, oh no, we exist and we have the right to exist, and my existence has really nothing to do with your existence.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. And we talked about this earlier. It's like, I feel like people carry over the religious mentality that they had from previous religions that they were brought up in, if they came to neo-paganism later in life, like most of us did. Like, while they are shifting to something that is like a radically different path, they keep those radical ideas from their past faith and just implement that over paganism. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We see that a lot, I think, with like like the Nordic pagan traditions. A lot of those can be very heavy with like neo-Nazism, which is just absurd that would even exist in the pagan spectrum.
Yeah. I think that most people who like genuinely follow like Asatru are not of that ilk. But then you have like the Odinists who like, they're not even really religious. It's more of like a white supremacy gang situation. So I would love to hear and see some of the facts, some of the receipts, some of the tea that we have worked on behind the scenes.
Like where do you want me to start?
So let's talk about that blog.
Oh yes. Okay. I've got like 20 tabs open. Let's see.
Doing the good work, babes. We're doing the good work. We're doing the research here.
Yes. We're not going to just speak off the cuff like some people in our current administration. So if you didn't know about it, there is a website called The Queerness. That's thequeerness.com. It is a really, 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 really cool blog about LGBT plus life. It touches all kinds of things, touches on everything, not just spirituality, but they do have a resident person who writes primarily about paganism, usually from a Wiccan perspective, but not always. And there is a really good blog from, let's see, March 12th, 2017, called Queer and Wicca, a Contradiction, as a question, posing it as a question. And it goes in really deep about, which is actually a really quick, easy read, but it goes in very deep on, whether or not LGBT people should even be allowed in Wicca, which is wild.
Which is so wild that like the word is even allowed.
Yes. And then it also goes into the idea of, rethinking your structure in Wicca and greater paganism. Speaking of specifically the god and the goddess. Because, you know, we do what we're told. We're sheeple. And, you know, a lot of us don't question when we come into the craft, you know, that you have to have a god and a goddess, and that's just the way it is. But this article poses the thought that, you know, if you're LGBT, particularly, I think, of the T, maybe that model does not work for you. A binary system of gender in the craft might not work for you. And why should it be present? It's just a really good article, and I encourage everyone to check it out.
And we've linked that down below.
Yes.
So make sure you guys take note of that and check that out.
Yes.
Yeah, and I do think that that is one thing, like, that Wicca kind of does. I will say Gardnerian and Alexandrian Wicca kind of supports is this idea of like a binary, and that like you essentially have to work with the god and the goddess, or the triple goddess and the horned god, or you have to have a matron and patron deity, like, in order to be a Wiccan. And like, I think that's good for a lot of people. And I'm not saying like you can't do that, or that if you do that, that's problematic. But I'm saying that, like, if you don't want to do that, that should not be an issue. That should not be viewed as like less than.
Absolutely. If it works for you, that's great. No one's telling you to stop. But just know that there are people that's not going to jive with, and that's okay. They can have their own system, because this path is personal anyway. That's what makes it so liberating from the other religious and spiritual paths that are out there, in my opinion.
So let me ask you, this is a personal question, if you don't mind. And if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to. But how do you feel like your gender identity and your sexuality sculpt your craft, if it does at all?
Okay, so it definitely does. And in a lot of ways. And it took me a long minute to realize how heavily it does influence. And I think that's because, for me, my path is a form of like therapy for me, to help me break out of old thought forms that I was raised in, and shame that I was taught to have about my identity. And that at 31, I'm still working through. And originally, I worked with just female entities, like female goddesses, because I think that's all I had ever known, because I was raised in a single household with a mother. And I needed to work through my relationship with my mom. So I did that through goddess work. But now I'm at a point where I almost exclusively, for the past like year, have been working with male deities. And it wasn't a conscious shift, it just happened. But I'm working with deities that have been typically presented as like hyper masculine and like macho aggressive in mythology. And I think that's like something for me that's helping me come to terms with like my own masculine energy that I've always kind of tried to shun. But no, it bleeds into every part of my path. Definitely my gender identity and my sexual identity. But it doesn't have to for everyone. But it definitely does on my path.
Yeah, I think that, like, for me, it definitely shapes my path and my perspective. Like, you know, in astrology, we have the eighth house being the house of Scorpio, the house of sex, death, and transformation, and like archetypes of like the phoenix or the butterfly, and like these transformative, like, animal medicines. But also that eighth house of Scorpio has been like so fundamental for me in my life, because I am like a living embodiment of like that energy. And like Baphomet, this androgynous aspect of both male and female, both man and beast, has been really pivotal for me, because like that to me is kind of like a representation of something sacred that I can identify with, because as above, so below, as the gods, so are we. And I don't think that, you know, that is the sum of who I am entirely. You know what I mean? Like this, being LGBT is a part of who I am, but it is not necessarily all of who I am.
Right. Right.
And I think that when it comes to the craft, we have to kind of carry that same energy. Like, it is a part of who we are. It is a part of, like the cosmos, so to speak. And honoring that sacredness and that divinity is important, but it shouldn't necessarily like be the sum of who we are, you know?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So, when it comes to like the magic that you do, how do you feel like it sculpts or changes that?
What, I'm trying to think of a way to word that answer that's not without going too personal. But so I've been working a lot in the past year, specifically with Odin. And for me, it was very liberating to find that all these father gods, these macho gods, had a lot of myths where they cross-dressed or changed gender. And that was like very eye-opening and like groundbreaking for me. So my gender identity in that way informs my magic, because when I'm doing magic, almost 9.5 times out of 10, I'm doing it completely in the opposite gender of what I was born as, which would be female, like full everything. And that's just very empowering for me and helps me, I feel like, hone that energy. It makes me feel like I'm doing something stronger, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example.
Yeah, I feel like, I feel like as a practicing witch, as someone who is LGBTQ, like my magic is sculpted kind of by like the same thing of like transformation, so to speak. And I think that alchemy is like something that's important to me in the sense of like literally turning lead into gold. And I think that, for myself, turning a lot of my personal pain or angst, because especially like, unfortunately, the society that we live in, kind of like preaches this ideal that like we are unnatural or that we are not sacred. And I think that conditioning, and a lot of what I'm talking about is also shown in the comments if you've been seeing them.
I
But
have.
like society makes it seem like we are unnatural or that we are unwelcomed or that we are not allowed to be sacred. And I think that what is going down in the comment section is a perfect example of what I am talking about. For me, like it's like I'm accepted and I'm celebrated if I'm given to them in a certain depiction or a certain way. But when I talk about my experiences as a trans woman, this is what happens.
Yeah.
This is what happens. If I just speak as I am, then it's fine. You know what I mean? But if I actually try to talk about LGBT issues, this is the kind of hate and this is the kind of bigotry that I'm talking about. So I want people to see these comments for what they are.
Absolutely.
And know that it is not tolerated and it is not going to be really paid any attention to. I do see the comments down there. Don't think that I don't. I do see them.
Same.
And I get a lot of comments on a regular basis, from the Islamic community telling me that I'm a kafir, that I'm a disbeliever, that I'm an infidel. Like, sweetie, that's the point of my channel. Or telling me that I'm practicing sihr, that I'm practicing witchcraft. Like, that's the whole point of my channel, babe.
Right. But also, if you're gonna troll and comment, at least be historically factual, because some of these comments are not historically factual. So thank you so much.
So back to the main aspect of witchcraft and LGBT, right? Like, we were also going to, I think, talk about Gerald Gardner.
Right. Right. So Gerald Gardner, regardless of his beliefs on sexuality, we can't deny that he's almost single-handedly responsible for the resurgence and credibility given to modern paganism, specifically Wicca and witchcraft. We all are working off of his design, whether you want to admit it or not. We almost all are working off of his template. And that's just is what it is. However, and again, he's held in high regard in the community, and I understand that. So I don't want to bash like our idols, but he wasn't particularly progressive in terms of his views on homosexuality. In fact, there was a woman named Lois Bourne, who was a high priestess in the Bricket Wood Coven, who worked with him exclusively in his original coven. And she had to leave and form her own because he was so homophobic, and that he would kind of get on these tangents after circles, she would say, where he would, which we're taking her word for it, but where he would just go on and on and on about how homosexuals were against the natural law of the universe. So that's not to discredit again what he did for us, but just know your history. Know that this path, as we know it now, came into existence in like 1955, when being homosexual was illegal in almost every nation still. So,
and being homosexual or trans is like literally still illegal, punishable by death in some countries.
Right. But what's wild?
Punishable by death.
Yeah. But what is wild is like, the past is not perfect. But we are no better than the people that are in the past. And I think sometimes we think we've progressed so much as a culture, so we must be better than our ancestors, but that's not true. In some ways, our ancestors were more enlightened than we were. And I find that specifically on LGBT issues. Not all cultures that were powerful were anti-LGBT. Now, were they perfect?
No, I agree. Yeah.
No. But a lot of them really did embrace the trans identity and the gay identity and way many other identities, sexual and gender-wise. So, know your history. That's my point. Know your history. Like, what you've been told isn't always what's been held as fact. And at some point, you, straight cis white man, or otherwise, were the enemy too. So,
Well, and I know that, like, for example, like, there are more than just two genders recognized, even like in India, for example. And like, there's been more than just two genders recognized in some indigenous American cultures.
Right.
So like, we are not a new thing. Like, this is not new. This is not something that just came out of nowhere. Like, we've existed for a very long time. Even like in ancient Greece and Rome, like, we were there too. Look at Aphrodite's child. Maybe this isn't necessarily the best example, but look at Aphrodite's child. Who was the father of this? Hermaphroditus, the god/goddess of prostitution. Hermaphroditus, the deity of hermaphrodites.
Yeah.
Like, we've been around, honey. Like, we're not going anywhere.
Nope. Also, if we're working off the idea that gender is binary and that God himself and herself are binary, then wouldn't the logical conclusion be that a trans person would be like an amazing godly embodiment of the gods? You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense.
No, but really.
But really. Which, I know in Siberian, this is ancient Siberian culture, because now they're very problematic, but in ancient Siberian culture, where we get the word shaman from, trans people were held as the highest person in their culture, like in their villages, in their microcosmic little towns. And usually, whether you wanted to or not, the trans person was held as the medicine man or woman of their community, because it was believed that you walk between two genders, therefore you walk between two worlds, and are more knowledgeable than poor little cis people. But, times change.
Well, and I'm very much the opinion that, like, there is no issue, right? Like, with kind of following into this heteronormativity. Like, that's not the issue. The issue is making other people feel like they are not sacred and connected to the divine because they're not heteronormative. Like, that is my issue. My issue is not necessarily heteronormativity as a whole. My issue is heteronormativity forcing us to feel like we are not sacred. Because I don't feel that way. I feel like we are all connected with the divine. We are all sacred. And that's really not something that's up for debate. And I think that the Abrahamic faiths, specifically calling out Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, is what has caused this. You know what I mean?
Totally. Also, just to go back to several comments before, to Animus channel, you do have to give a lot of credit to Tolkien in our modern craft, definitely. He formed the way we see the Norse traditions completely, especially elves. So yeah, good point.
So I guess moving forward from this, like, how can we make sure that we're supporting the LGBTQ community when it comes to the craft? Like, what can we do as members of the community? But for those maybe listening who aren't members of the community, like, overall, what can we be doing to make sure that, we're supporting the LGBTQ community in the craft? You know what I mean? Like, what are we really, like, what can we really do to make sure that our voices are heard and that our energy has an impact moving forward and that we're not further erased like we have been in the craft in like the past 20 years?
Right. Sometimes I think it's as simple as existing and showing that you exist. So like being vocal, putting out videos or making blogs, or putting out content to show visibility is very important. Don't feel like your voice is not important. So sharing your own thoughts and ideas is a huge way, or sharing the thoughts and ideas of other people in the community to other people is important. But yeah, I think that's seriously the simplest way that you can help the community, if you, whether you were in it or not, is contribute to the community or actively share information put out by the community.
Well, and I want to say that, kind of to piggyback off of what you said, like, I think that it's important to make sure that, we're uplifting and supporting our fellow LGBT members of the craft, but also to make sure that, like, for those of you who might not be part of the community, make sure that you're allowing us to, like, speak for ourselves. Like, don't speak over us, don't speak for our experience, but instead make a platform for us to speak and our voices to be heard. And when you go to your family's little, bachelorette parties, birthday parties, holiday fiestas, this, that, and the third, and your problematic uncle says something, maybe correct them, because that's where it starts.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
And I want to say too, and I'm not even going to mention this person's name in the comments because I'm not going to give that really any more energy than what I'm about to give it. But in the comment section, it was mentioned Leviticus 20:13. If a man practices homosexuality, having sex with another man, they have committed a detestable act. They must both be put to death, for they are guilty of a capital offense. And what I want to say to that, I'm not going to argue with you about biblical or Quranic preachings, but what I want to say is that you are on a witch's channel, and I don't support, endorse, or condone any of that dark-sided, perverted nonsense from the Bible or the Quran or the Torah. That's not here, babe. I don't know if you're just finding my channel or if maybe you didn't know this, but this is a left-hand path witch's perspective channel. And I would much rather reign in hell than serve that God any day of the week. Let me tell you, I would much rather lay in bed with Belal and Beelzebub any day of the week than with Raphael any day.
Absolutely.
So that like teaching, why don't you apply that to yourself? And if you as a man don't want to have sex with men, you follow that, but you leave the rest of us the hell alone. Okay, because that's not our opinion or our religious belief, and we have the right to practice our religion.
Right.
Oh my
Right.
God, who knew? It's crazy,
But
right?
also, let us remember the wonderful biblical quote of, let he without sin cast the first stone. We're all sinful. We're all sinners. The Bible actually says we're all sinners. So you have no room to speak.
And I don't even recognize even the concept of sin. That is
Me
not a part of,
either.
like, honey, sin is not a part of my ministry. If you want to shame yourself and if you want to feel bad about yourself because you have desires or urges of any nature, not even just a sexual nature, maybe it's gluttony or pride or lust or whatever, like, that's your business. That's not my business. And I think it's very natural for us to have those urges. And it's something that makes us human, and it's not something to be demonized. So when people, because I get that a lot, I get a lot of people, quoting scripture at me. And I'm just always like, it always just kind of throws me for a loop because I'm like, I'm not sitting here trying to like get you to worship the dark goddess or make a blood ritual sacrifice or start celebrating Esbats or anything. So I don't know why you feel the need to like quote scripture that doesn't even like, that is not a part of my ministry whatsoever. So it has no real power over me either. Like, you just look like a religious zealot and a colonizer if we really want to talk tea.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's on colonization. So the moral of the story is, if you are in the craft, when you are in this community, just don't be problematic and don't make LGBT people feel like they are not welcome. Going back to kind of the beginning of this video, it is something that I have experienced myself. I have seen this sort of stuff online and in my physical community. And I just think that that sort of behavior is really dangerous because it kind of instills this sense of, I mean, just trans women alone have like the highest mortality rate in the community. Like, we need to stop entertaining that.
Absolutely.
Like, we have a trans day of remembrance for a reason. And when you make those sort of comments, it fuels that. And in my personal opinion, that is real evil. This haram, this sin that you speak of, that is real evil right there, is making people feel like they are so unnatural or so unloved that they have no other choice but to end their own lives. And I also, and this could probably be a separate video, but I also have this controversial opinion that the God of the Old Testament or the Quran or Allah is actually Shaitan or the devil, and that Satan, Lucifer, the devil, the Holy Trinity, Satan, Lucifer, the devil, is actually God. Because let's not forget too that Satan, Lucifer, Shaitan was one of the first to advocate for the gays, babe.
Also, I feel like we are this close to being able to historically prove, scientifically prove, that indeed what you said is pretty much true. Like, we are this close to showing that there are two separate gods in the New Testament and the Old Testament.
Oh, for sure, because they don't sound anything alike.
No.
Like, the God of the New Testament is very much about, love and peace and acceptance and this and that, and just accept him and take him into you and let him wash over you and fill you, and you'll be saved. Like, a little creepy, babe. But the God of the Old Testament is like fire and brimstone. And like, if you eat shrimp or wear mixed fabric, or if you're not a virgin when you get married, like, we're going to stone your ass out in the streets. Like, that is so primitive. So primitive.
You have to remember that I think most religious texts, regardless of what religion they're in, are not just religious texts. They are societal guidelines of a time way past. So, pick and choose what you're going to take from those.
Yes. And it's 2021, sweetie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me look at some of these comments here. I've kind of avoided these comments because I've seen a whole lot of the mess going on. So if you're watching this and if you're a supporter and if you're here for the Holy Trinity of the girls, the goths, and the gays, like this video for the algorithm and leave a heart down below, please. Yes. Because people have just been so out of pocket and so out of line in the comment section. And I really need a moderator, apparently, on my channel because I've had to moderate the chat while doing the show. And that's just not the tea, hunty, not for me.
Mm.
Okay. Some of this stuff I almost don't even just want to give any sort of attention to. You know what I mean? On air. Like, I'm sure we'll kiki off air about it. But one of the comments I do want to say, and I'm not going to say their name, is you would be killed anytime before 1950. Do you guys hear that? Like, this is someone randomly coming onto my personal channel, my small YouTube channel, where I vlog about witchcraft. Some random person coming onto my channel saying, you would be killed anytime before 1950. Well, okay, first of all, it depends on where we would be.
Yes.
Okay, but second of all, like, that's kind of the point, bro. Like, that's kind of the point, is that, like, you're saying that you would kill us? Like, that's the point, bro. That's the point. So you proved the point. That is a problem.
Yes, historically inaccurate statement. You can't use that as a blanket term because that's not true to all societies and cultures before 1950.
And then this other person said, in my country, you would be stoned. That's what I'm saying, is that even today, there are countries that I literally cannot even go to without having to fear for my literal legal safety. There are countries I could go to where I would literally be beheaded.
Yeah, same. There's still countries that I can't go to, and I would be killed.
Yeah, it's just sad. Sad, sad, sad. Animist, I really should make you a moderator because you always come in clutch and you're always here on the channel. I just don't know how, like, I'm kind of like technologically incompetent. So I'll have to like look into that and see like how to actually make someone a moderator. But we are getting close to the minute mark here, so we will have to wrap this up. But I think the moral of the story is very much just like, don't be problematic and stop making LGBT people feel like they're not welcome in the community. Like, basically, that's the message.
Absolutely.
And if I see you doing this mess in my channel, it will be shut down and you will be made an example of. Okay? That's all I'm saying.
Ooh, also random, but quickly. This is a great place to start if you want to learn about how we've always existed. Always.
Gay Witchcraft. Who's that by?
Christopher Penczak.
Oh, love Mr. Penczak.
Me too. He does also cover the T in this, as well as the B. However, they're not
the T's and the B's, kids. The T's and the B's.
But it is not. They're not as fleshed out, unfortunately, as just heterosexual men and women in the book. But it's a really good jumping off point, and I highly recommend it. It's fabulous. And also, just one more. If you are a male or male inclined or are interested in maleness, there is a really good book called, sorry, I don't have the cover, but it's called The Path of the Green Man. And that is Gay Men, Wicca, and Living a Magical Life by Michael Thomas Ford. This book helps you break down your own bias as a male person in this society. And you might not think you have any bias towards women, be them trans or cis or whatever, but it's in there probably still. And I highly recommend this book for that reason, to help you break that down.
I'm here for the book recommendations. I'm here for it. I
Yeah.
actually I've never read Gay Witchcraft. And I feel like I'm like doing such a disservice by not. So I feel like I'm going to have to like go on to the Googles and get
It's
myself a
good.
copy.
I mean, keep in mind, I think it was published in like the very early 2000s. So some of the content is a little lacking, or maybe the wordage isn't not what you would want now. But the heart of the book still stands for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Another good book too, I think, is called Sluts, Feminists, and Witches. That
Ooh.
book is like a relatively newer book and it's iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Highly recommend. 10 out of 10.
Let me make a note. What was it called again?
I think it's
Slide.
called Sluts, Feminists, and Witches.
Cool. Oh, also, I feel like we didn't even touch on just quickly that there are decades old LGBT friendly paths in paganism. Because I know some people do like to have a lot of structure. They need that. So let's not forget that there are the radical fairies, there are the Minoans, and there are the Phoenix Fellowship. And those are actually pretty good places to start. They're not transphobic, and they're not homophobic because their members are all gay and trans. So heavily structured places to start do exist that are friendly to all peoples.
Animist, I just clicked on your name and made you a moderator. So hopefully in the future, if anyone comes onto the channel like saying some really hateful stuff, and if you want to chime in and moderate, like I just made you a moderator. So I've never done this before. So you're my first channel moderator. I don't even know what that necessarily entails or what that means, but there we go. So, but yeah, we do have to wrap this up because we've been on here now for almost an hour. Believe it or not, it's been almost an hour. It's crazy. I feel like time flies when we're having fun. And I definitely would like to have you back on the channel again, Warlock, of course.
I would love that.
And maybe we can touch on, some of the stuff that we didn't get a chance to talk about because this topic is so big and there's so much to it. And there's so many more ways that we could take queer witchcraft in, trans witchcraft, gay witchcraft, whatever words we want to use, witchcraft, LGBTQXIA, XYZ witchcraft in. So I think that would be fun. And I think it'd be fun to like plan something and like maybe like talk about like different gods or something.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because there are so many more than just hermaphrodite. There's a ton.
Well, that's like kind of who came to my mind first.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally.
So yeah, so we're gonna sign off here, you guys. Thank you all for joining us so much, and until next time, blessed be.